Ecoholics. So this is a new series where I will be doing previous year questions from JNU exam. So in today's video, I will be doing question number 1 from the paper 2015. So what is the question? The question reads that suppose a tax of ₹5 per unit is imposed on a good and the tax causes the equilibrium quantity of the good to decrease from 200 units to 100 units. So the equilibrium quantity was earlier equals to 200. But because now we have a tax getting imposed, so the equilibrium quantity now falls from 200 to 100 units. The tax decreases consumer surplus. So what is consumer surplus? Consumer surplus is that extra benefits which consumers enjoy at the equilibrium price. So that decreases by 450. So there is a fall in consumer surplus which is 450 and decreases the producer surplus by 300. So producer surplus is also decreasing by 300. The deadweight loss from the taxes. So what is deadweight loss? So whenever there is a change in the market, in the equilibrium, so we have seen here that the consumer surplus is also decreasing, the producer surplus is also decreasing. So they are decreasing just because of an imposition of ₹5 per unit tax on a good. So the deadweight loss is that loss which will not, so now the government has imposed tax. So some amount of consumer surplus and producer surplus, it will go into the government's pockets. So the government will be collecting that. So in an economy, it's like that ki consumer surplus getting reduced but going to the government, or producer surplus also getting reduced but going to the government. So at least it's there in the economy. At least it's there in the economy. But sometimes what happens is that there is a small part which neither goes to the government from the consumer. It doesn't go to the producer surplus. It doesn't go to government also. So it's lost there in between. So we need to find that. So coming to this thing. So this is the equilibrium market situation where this is my demand curve. This is my supply curve. So we were at equilibrium here. The equilibrium was, earlier it was 200 and whatever the prices were. So I'm keeping P only. So now, because the prices have increased, because there is an imposition of tax, of course, so we are moving at this thing, which is P plus 5. Now, because the prices are increased, so what happens that if the tax is imposed even on producer, the producer is going to shift it onto the customer. So that's total incidence of tax, which depends on the elasticities and everything. So here, because we are not given with such information, so let's say because the tax is getting imposed, now the prices will rise by 5 unit. So at the increased prices by 5, what demand I'm getting? That's 100. That's 100. 100 units are getting demanded, but the 100 units producers were even ready to sell at this price. So I don't know whatever is the price, but let's call it P dash. So producers were even ready to sold it at this price. So earlier, so if I draw the initial one, what I had drawn before, so this is my demand curve, this is my supply curve. So what is this is equilibrium. This is equilibrium price, let's say. This is equilibrium quantity. So what is consumer surplus? Consumer surplus is this upper triangle. This is consumer surplus. And what is producer surplus? This dot wala area, this dot is my producer surplus. Clear? That's my producer surplus. So here, because of increase in prices due to imposition of tax, consumer surplus is now this area. This area is now consumer surplus. And we know from the question also that consumer surplus has reduced by 450 and this area is producer surplus. So earlier, the whole thing, this whole triangle was consumer surplus plus producer surplus, that is total surplus. But now this is consumer, this is producer surplus. So what happens to this area in between? The government has imposed tax. So the government will also be collecting some money through the tax. So the tax rate is 5 per unit, and how much new quantity is getting demanded in an economy? So 100 units are getting. So the tax will be imposed on 100 units because that's the new quantity. So what is the tax amount? 500 rupees. That is 500 rupees. So the difference what these people are paying and this thing, if I draw stars in between, this area is the tax collection. If I draw these vertical lines also, this area is the tax collection. So from earlier it was included in consumer surplus and producer surplus, but now this portion, this half one and this half one, it is getting from consumer, it is shifted to government, from producer also it is shifted to government. But if you can see this triangle, this red triangle, it is not getting included anywhere, neither in your consumer, neither in your producer, and doesn't even in your taxes. So this red triangle is my deadweight loss. So how we find deadweight loss? So because whatever was my consumer surplus earlier, so the fall in consumer surplus is 450 and the fall in producer surplus is 300. So this is the total fall, this is the total reduction in your surplus. But as I said, that part of the total reduction is going to government. So government ke paas how much is going? 500. So this is the total surplus loss, that is 750. This is not deadweight loss because out of the 750, 500 is going to the government. So minus 500. So it means this remaining 250, which is getting reduced from surplus, but it is not going to the government, that is my deadweight loss. So what is the deadweight loss? Deadweight loss is 250. So according to the options given, what is the correct option? It is option number A. So I will go with the option number A. So this was the solution to question number 1 of JNU 2015. If you want to see more such solutions, please like, share, subscribe to the channel. Thank you everyone.